Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. You know, we have been having such a good time doing these lists of conductors and sorting and characterizing them and chatting about them and arguing over them. And oh my God, it's been great. And I want to thank all of you for participating. And because we've had such a good time, I didn't want to end the series. I mean, we've already done 40 of the top 20 conductors, right? And there's so many more. But beyond that, there are other ways to look at this particular topic, other ways to group them and arrange them like little chess pieces. It's just marvelous. So we're going to keep going for a little while and see what we come up with. I hope this doesn't overstay its welcome too badly. I mean, you know, there is such a thing as, you know, overkill, but I've never been one to know what that is. So there we go. This is the Venerable Conductor Challenge. One of the things that you have noted is that you keep throwing out names of conductors who aren't dead. And my whole point in doing this list originally and in critiquing the stupid BBC, whatever it was, top 20 conductors is that you can't compare live conductors to dead conductors because live conductors are still working. Whereas with dead conductors, you have their entire legacy in a clump and you can look at it whole. And the comparison isn't really a fair one. However, we have almost dead conductors. I mean, that sounds really grisly, doesn't it? But I've called it the Venerable Conductor Challenge. In other words, these are conductors who are still with us, but they're all, with one exception, 80 or over. And so we don't know how much longer they're going to be with us. And we have a pretty reasonably good sense of what they've been doing and what their career's been like. Some of them have had big collections and boxes of things already issued. And so we can make a decision where they fit. So here's your challenge. I'm giving you a list of 10 venerable conductors. And you tell me, and however many you want to deal with or that you know, whether they are generalists, specialists, or if they belong in the top 20. And if they do belong in the top 20, who would you remove from the top 20? Who would they replace? Boot out of the list. I think this will kind of be interesting. I really do. And I'm very curious to see what you come up with. Obviously, this is going to be based on your own experience and your own knowledge. And don't worry about how much that is. I mean, you know, we'll have the conversation as it comes up. But this is an opportunity for you to really decide who the big names are, at least based on this list. And it's interesting because depending on where you are in your classical music excursions, some of are how old you are, or who you grew up with, or who you were first initiated with. I mean, your perspective on the history of these people is going to be very different. So we're going to get all kinds of opinions. It's going to be all over the place. And just be civil, as I've always said. And you have been, actually. You guys have been really, really good. So I don't really worry too much about that. Anyway, here we are, the Venerable Conductor Challenge. Generalist, specialist, or top 20. And if top 20, who is no longer in the top 20? Number 1, Neeme Järvi. This is probably the conductor mentioned the most by most of you. And I find that wonderful because Järvi is not a conductor known for his, German standard repertoire. He does interesting repertoire and unusual repertoire. He does it extraordinarily well for the most part. However, when he has done normal repertoire, that is like his Nielsen cycle or Brahms or something, he hasn't been as good as the best. As the other guys. He tends to be a little bit laissez-faire when it comes to the orchestra. Now, this has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is that he lets the orchestras play. I mean, it's very exciting because he really lets them go. And it can be thrilling. But in music that other people have done to death, we also can detect a certain relaxed sloppiness. I mean, it's the only word. I mean, lack of attention to detail. And it hasn't hurt him because he spent so much time doing repertoire that nobody else knows. But, That's for you guys to tell me. But he definitely is venerable. He's getting up there. He's had some health issues. You might say his jets are not firing quite as powerfully as they used to, although he's made some beautiful recordings for Chandos and whatnot. And he had a very interesting career because, he started out on BIS. He started out actually in Estonia doing other things, but for international purposes. He started out on BIS. He jumped ship to Deutsche Grammophon. He made all those wonderful records for Chandos and then jumped ship for Deutsche Grammophon. And now he's back with Chandos for the most part. Good. I'm glad he's back because Deutsche Grammophon didn't know what to do with him. They really didn't. They did some Stenhammer, that was excellent, some Berwald, which was pretty good. Then they did Nielsen and Sibelius cycles all over again, which were, and a few other things. So he did some really fine operas, actually. He did like Tchaikovsky's Mazeppa, I think, and some other stuff. But basically, they weren't quite sure, what to do with him because major labels are not terribly interested in unusual repertoire because it doesn't sell. And so there you go. So Neeme Järvi's definitely one. Herbert Blomstedt. Oh, boy. Everybody is mooning over Herbert Blomstedt. Now, he's a wonderful conductor. I love his Decca box. He did sterling work in San Francisco. Some fabulous work before that with the Staatskapelle Dresden in, Beethoven and Schubert and Bruckner and Strauss. He's a fine, fine musician. He really is. But for most of his career, he was nothing special. He really wasn't. I mean, he was a nice, decent, work-a-day conductor. But gradually, as he has matured, he has been doing, more and better. His Staatskapelle Dresden work is so great because he had a fabulous orchestra to work with. When he didn't have a fabulous orchestra to work with, he was much less interesting. In San Francisco, it all came together. It really, really did. And then, of course, he also went to the Gewandhaus, and now he's running around, and he's in his 90s, and he's still conducting, and he's getting slower and slower and duller again, and he probably should retire. But people are looking at him like, he's the grand old man, because he's in his 90s, and he's still moving. And, I have, my feeling about that is the way, I make no issue about sex, age, religion, or anything else. I just go by what my ears tell me. My ears tell me it's time for him to stop, quite frankly. We'll see what else comes. Maybe he's still got some juice in him that'll be interesting. But he's had a very interesting career. And you tell me, is he a generalist, a specialist? Is he a top 20 guy? Who does he kick out of the top 20? I'm very interested to know. Next, John Eliot Gardiner. Oh, he's so obnoxious. He's such an egomaniac. I mean, I had to interview him once. It was horrible. He's just a jerk. I mean, frankly, in my opinion. But he has done brilliant work as a conductor. I mean, what matters is not his personality. He's a spoiled rich kid. What matters is musical quality. And he does have excellent musical judgment and taste. And he beats up singers, and he got in trouble for that last year or the year before, somewhere around there, for whacking a guy. I mean, he gets angry and screams at people. It's ridiculous. Anyway, the bottom line is he's made a bazillion records. He's one of the paragons of the period instrument movement. He also, however, tried to break into normal conducting. You may recall he was the conductor at North German Radio for a little bit. He made a bunch of Deutsche Grammophon recordings of things like The Planets and Percy Granger's The Warriors, which of course they just love in Germany. And he did some like Dvorak or other things, a few things, not terribly successfully as a conductor of real music. Just kidding, normal stuff. So he has, and then he went, and after Deutsche Grammophon or Archive dumped him, he founded his own label, modestly named Soli Deo Gloria, only to the glory of God. Oh gosh, hubris of the man. It's amazing. So he could do a whole Bach cantata cycle where he ran around Europe with microphones and a tape recorder and did Bach cantatas all over the place. Some were very good, some weren't. It was highly variable, as you might expect. And he spent piles of other people's money doing this, which is incredible that people would fund this nonsense. Anyway, so there's lots of, he did Brahms symphonies and Schumann symphonies, all this stuff, none of it terribly successfully, in my opinion. But that's me. You're the ones who are going to judge. So there you go. And he's now, in his grumpy 80s, and he's grumpy. So there you go. John Eliot Gardiner. And after that, Zubin Mehta. Many of you have mentioned Zubin Mehta. Of course, he did some stunning work. I mean, with the Israel Philharmonic, we do need a Zubin Mehta Israel Philharmonic box. That would be really lovely. There's some great stuff there that has been sort of sidelined for the Los Angeles stuff, which is also marvelous. Even with the New York Philharmonic, although he was mostly used as an accompanist and he remade things, some of that's good and some of it isn't. It's highly variable. His tel deck material was better. For Columbia, he also made excellent recordings with the Berlin Philharmonic. He was with the Vienna State Opera for a while. He's been everywhere. And lately, he's another one who's still conducting, and he did an absolutely dreadful Beethoven cycle in Italy that was recorded on Dynamic. It was just an embarrassment. I was hoping for more. I really was. So there is quite a bit of stuff to choose from, to pick and choose. And he's been a tremendously versatile presence on the international scene for so long now that people just sort of take him for granted. It's kind of like a piece of furniture. It's like always sitting in the corner. It's nice. You look at it, you go, oh, it's nice. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see what you think about him. Riccardo Chailly is the youngest person on this list. He's only in his 70s. I mean, he's not that old actually, but he's amassed a very, very impressive discography. He's had major positions. Right now, he's a music director of La Scala, if I'm not mistaken, for the next few years. We'll see how well that goes, since music directors at La Scala tend not to last very long. It's similar to Vienna, actually, because it's just it's a political appointment as much as an artistic one. And so you never know what's going to happen. But in any case, he was first with the Berlin Radio Symphony, and then the Concertgebouw, and then the Gewandhaus, and he's been a Decca artist for most of his career. And so you can decide, does he belong in the top 20? He's actually a pretty unassuming guy, a very, very nice man when I spoke to him anyway. Really, really a pleasant person. And he doesn't, there's nothing histrionic about him. Not that he doesn't do sometimes splendidly compelling performances. He does. But I mean, just in terms of his personalities, he tends to be affable and relaxed and congenial. And you don't think of him as a hotshot artist at all, but he is. He's a very, very sincere and major talent. So but he's hard to pigeonhole. Oh, let's see what you think. He's also did some beautiful opera recordings and other things. I mean, the he's really talented. And he's still around and going strong. It's also hard sometimes to pigeonhole these people because the record labels are no longer in the mix. The major labels have, they've dropped out. they're nowhere to be seen. So we don't know what he's doing currently. We don't have the very latest in Chaillydom. But that's okay. That's why I include him here now, because most of what we know of him is going to be history. We don't see much coming out in the future, even though he's quite active. You just don't see records being made the way they were. I mean, maybe streaming things or other ways to amass information, more current information. But none of these artists is being, documented the way that they were in the heyday of this, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It's all gone. So we can take a step back, even though they're still with us, and hopefully still will be for quite a while. I wish them all well, and take stock of where they've been. So after Riccardo Chailly, Michael Tilson Thomas. Now we all know the story there. I mean, he's just 80, but he has glioblastoma, which is the most virulent and horrible form of cancer you can probably get, or one of them. I mean, and it's invariably fatal in like 99% of cases, and he's already lasted much longer than a lot of people with that particular disease, because like I said, I've had experience of it a couple times, it's really bad. And we find out now that he's actually he was conducting, but he's decided finally to step down completely because his health isn't going to allow him to continue. And it's a thousand pities, but he has been extensively documented. We just talked about the big Sony box, which included also his RCA recordings in San Francisco. There's also the San Francisco Symphony's own series of recordings that they made with him. It would be really nice if the San Francisco Symphony issued a big box of Michael Tilson Thomas stuff, in honor of his 80th or whatever, while he's still with us, to enjoy it. But we'll see what happens. In any case, it's a remarkable career, a really remarkable career, and I think that we can decide: is he a generalist, a specialist, or does he belong in the top 20? He's certainly a major guy. Absolutely. Some of you mentioned him before, not realizing that the living and the dead should not mix. So let's see where he shakes out. Next, oh boy, Daniel Barenboim. Well, a bunch of you mentioned him too. He's also just recently retired for health reasons, and he's been around forever. My goodness, ever since the early days with Jacqueline Dupre, his wife, and he recorded for EMI, and then he went to Deutsche Grammophon, and he was also I think on some Warner Teldec things, and oh gosh, he's been all over the place, absolutely all over the place. And he tends to be, well, I'm not going to say whether he's a generalist or a specialist, but let me put it to you this way: 3 Bruckner cycles is a dead giveaway. It really is. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that works out. But his career is, for all intents and purposes, basically over, and he's there to be judged. He's sitting in judgment, and you, my friends, are judge and jury. So lay into him. Daniel Barenboim next. William Christie. Well, he was mentioned a few times as well. We now have a big, beautiful William Christie box on Erato, which is gorgeous. They really ought to do one for Harmonia Mundi as well. He was totally instrumental in giving us Baroque opera and other Baroque thingies. And now, when we talk about specialist, by the way, since we're talking about generalist, specialist, or top 20, Christie admirably, I would say, has refrained from going too far into the 19th century. I mean, Mozart is about as far as he goes for the most part. I mean, I think he's done some other things. I don't remember exactly, but he's not doing Beethoven cycles. He's not doing Brahms. He's not, not to the extent some of these other people have. Bringing the whole misconceived period instrument apparatus with them in music which has no business being played the way they play it. Christie hasn't done that. However, that doesn't necessarily make you a specialist. You can look at it a couple of ways, right? You can say, well, he's a specialist because he's a period instrument guy. I think that's the cheap, sleazy way out. I think you need to look at what he's done within the world of period instruments, because it's a world, right? I mean, you could be a generalist in the classical period. You could be a specialist in the classical period. You could only do, classical Mannheim school, or you could only do Haydn, or you could only do, whatever, opera, or you could only do this or that, or you can do a wide range. And that's what we're really talking about. When I say specialist versus generalist, it's about range more than anything else. And the range, it can be, well, I think you get the point. So categorize him how you whatever you please, but justify your decision. Be prepared to justify your decision. Put a line or two as to why and what your thinking is, because I'm really interested in what your thinking is. Your thinking is fascinating and quite often different from my own, and quite often equally valid, if not more so. So that's William Christie. Next, here's another one a bunch of you mentioned, Riccardo Muti. He is also still with us for the time being. He's in Chicago. He continues to make recordings, but most of those recordings have been things that he's done before. He's doing a lot of remakes. He's in that phase of his life where he sort of sits back and does the things that he likes best. Although, like the Shostakovich 13th was new repertoire. That was really, really nice. That was a wonderful recording. So, yeah, there's other stuff in Bruckner and things that he hasn't done or hadn't recorded previously. But he's got a big Warner box already. He was the Verdi conductor. So is he a specialist? But look at what's in the Warner box. Tchaikovsky and Schumann and Schubert and things that are just absolutely splendid. So is he a generalist? How is history going to look at him? How are we going to think about him? And then, of course, there's all the stuff he did for Philips, which is now Decca, and there's no box. We need a Muti box from Decca with all the Philips material he did in Philadelphia and Vienna. So there's much more to come. And last but not least, Christoph von Dohnányi, who is also retired. We have his Cleveland box. We do not have his Vienna box, and we need a Vienna box. He's another mostly Decca artist, almost entirely Decca, I think. He did operas. He did a lot of contemporary music, but he also did the Viennese classics. Generalist, specialist, top 20? You decide. There you have it, my friends. 10 very, very worthy names who have been with us for many decades, who've given us a tremendous amount of musical pleasure, and you have to rank them. So go at it. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.